Time to talk about China this morning, which is planning on building a clearing and settlement network for mobile payments using their digital yuan. According to an op-ed Monday in the People's Daily, rather. So the network will be a breakthrough point in the cross-border use of digital currency. The op-ed says basically they want to internationalize the use of the yuan, which of course is a competitor with the dollar. So there's a whole conversation to unspool there. And then of course there's like this conversation of what is the purpose of a CBDC and the purpose of cross-border payments with cryptocurrencies itself. And then for the final context there, you have Bitcoin mining being cracked down on, and even more, I'll call it propaganda, but maybe we shouldn't call it that. More comments from the central bank in China saying that cryptocurrencies are dangerous, and they're encouraging the use of their own CBDC, which has been rolled out across the country in multiple cities, still somewhat in a trial phase. But now they're looking to export it, which is a pretty big deal when you're talking about the dollar reserve status and how fiat currencies compete against each other. Naomi, your thoughts on this? Of course, we've had a lot of Chinese stories like Chinese money stories over the last few months. Like there's always a story about that. But this seems a little bit different in the sense that you now have them gunning for that dollar reserve status, and they're using cryptocurrency rails to do it. Is this just like a totalitarian nightmare when it comes with cryptocurrency? Is this like what we didn't want to see happen?
Well, yes, China in general is a totalitarian nightmare. It's not the only totalitarian nightmare in the world. But aside from that, it's very interesting because China has bet on the wrong horse here, right? Because there was a long patch of time where with different cryptocurrencies, people were saying, we're really worried about how much of this is mined in China. We're really worried that maybe the government could come over and, take over this and, embrace it. And then it would be this Chinese run thing. They could co-opt the system. They might have the ability to bring the system down, make it uncensorable. Like there was lots of fear around that simply because there was so much, hash power coming out of China. And then China turned around and fixed that issue for everyone by saying, we're kicking all of this out of the country. So the opposite of what people thought would happen happened. They were like, let's get it out of the country completely and let's embrace this digital yuan. Now, if they had done the other thing and recognized that the inevitable future is these private alternative currencies, it is, these decentralized networks, then they might have been able to set themselves up better for the future. Instead, I think that all these governments are being backed into a corner right now. They're all betting on the wrong horse. Rather than embracing this technology and positioning themselves in a way that could benefit from this inevitable rise that we know is happening, they're saying, let's try and put as many regulations as possible and let's double down on central bank digital currencies. I think that they were positioned to really have a good go at kind of being this dominant player, and they've lost that now. So it's just very interesting, this turn of events, and the rest of the world's kind of benefited because all of the mining left China. But I'll throw it to you, Ben. What's your thought on all of this?
I think this is really, really interesting. The internationalization aspect of this is huge, right? Because all the concerns that we've had and we've articulated, not around just CBDCs, but particularly the digital yuan and what digital currencies could mean in the hands of a centralized government, now expand that across the world, potentially, if you're using this or people are going to be trafficking in it, in mobile payments, which are becoming increasingly popular. That's a really big deal. And I think it also shows the value that China's placing on this and also the speed with which they are moving. This is happening really, really, really fast. And the rails are being laid at speeds that are going to, far eclipse what the EU or the US or anybody else, for that matter, is doing in this space at the moment. So we're getting a crash course in real time here, but the brakes are not being placed. It just seems to be accelerating. Can we also pour some out for Chinese gamers? There was a simultaneous report today that China's going to mandate only 3 hours of video games a day for its citizens. And I just, that's on top of that, and thinking also, in that regard, right, we're looking at, my gosh, what is it? But in the Philippines, there's blockchain-based video games being used to get digital currencies. And, that's cutting off a whole market for yes, Axie, thank you. Axie Infinity. And so, there's cutting off a whole market of that and removing a whole potential for, other ways of acquiring digital currencies simultaneously. So those two stories, I think this one's really interesting, but also that was another one that came out today that just has huge ramifications, for individuals, but also for blockchain-based gaming going forward in the country.
No, I think you're totally right there. And pour one out for the gamers.
Yeah.
I think I do sniff a Michael Casey op-ed coming out this weekend on this particular story. I'm actually interested to see what he's going to write about it, because he's been kind of tracking this narrative for a few years now about like the dollar reserve status. So I do want to not necessarily like push back on some comments about. I think things are going to get a little bit more interesting than we may think. I think that there is some validity to the CBDC argument, especially with how China is rolling it out and the ways that they're going to like use it against their own population. If exporting their like currency against the dollar works out, it depends on if people are going to use it. But they do have a lot of economic incentives to make people use it. But Naomi, Elliott, respond real quick there.
Yeah, I just think that it's really interesting bringing up the gaming stuff that's going on. Like, they're increasingly totalitarian. A lot of people thought that, maybe they'd start to open up their market more, and now they're just doubling down the opposite direction. And there is going to be pushback. I mean, people have the technological tools now to circumvent that kind of centralized power. Technology really is helping us by providing these decentralized alternatives. And so I just wonder, how long all this is going to last. I mean, these governments can cling onto power for an exceptionally long time, probably longer than we would expect. But eventually this is all going to come tumbling down.